The market district of Nexus Station Oriath 7 was alive with noise and movement and the smell of 100 different worlds all mixing together in the recycled air. Vira Selthon pushed through the crowd with her head down and her silver-white hair falling over her face, like a curtain she hoped would hide her shame. Her pale skin glowed faintly with the natural bioluminescence of her people, the Nethari, but that glow had grown dim from days without proper food or rest. She was starving, and she knew it would only get worse. A Torvani merchant with 4 arms and scales the color of rust saw her approaching his food stall. His eyes went wide and then narrow with disgust as he noticed the dark brand that ran across the left side of her face. The mark of severance. Every species in the Galactic Concord knew what it meant. "Get away from here, Marked One," the Torvani hissed, and he actually spat at her feet. "Your kind brings nothing but death and misery." Vira flinched and stumbled backward into a group of Kyrix traders. The insectoid beings clicked their mandibles in alarm and pulled their young ones close as if she carried some terrible disease. One of them made a gesture with its forelimbs that she recognized as a ward against evil. "Please," Vira whispered, her voice cracking from thirst. "I just need water. I can work for it." "I can," but they were already gone, skittering away through the crowd and leaving her alone in a small circle of empty space that formed wherever she walked. It was always like this. No matter where she went in the galaxy, the mark followed her, and so did the fear and hatred of every species she met. She tried the Solari traders next because the Solari were known for their neutrality in galactic affairs. Surely they would help her. But even the tall, willowy beings with their serene faces and flowing robes turned their backs when they saw her brand. "We cannot assist you," one of them said in a voice that held no emotion at all. "To do so would damage our trade relationships beyond repair." "You understand, of course." Vera did understand, and that was the worst part. She understood that she was poison to anyone who came near her. She understood that the Nethari Council had made sure of it when they branded her and cast her out 3 years ago. Her crime had been an accident. She had been born with a rare mutation that made her empathic abilities work in reverse. Instead of reading the emotions of others like a normal Nethari, she accidentally projected her own emotions onto those around her. During a diplomatic summit when she was only 19 years old, she had felt a moment of intense fear when an argument broke out between delegates. That fear had washed over Senator Vothron of the Torvani hegemony like a wave. His arts had not been strong enough to handle the sudden terror that was not his own. He had died right there on the floor of the assembly hall, and everyone had seen Vira standing nearby with her hands over her mouth and tears streaming down her face. The trial had been swift. The sentence had been absolute. The mark of severance meant she could never return to Nethari space, and it told every other species in the Concord that she was dangerous and should be shunned. Now Vira stumbled through the market with black spots dancing in her vision. When had she last eaten? 3 days ago? 4? She could not remember any more. Her legs gave out near a cargo bay at the edge of the commercial district, and she collapsed against a stack of metal crates. This was it, she thought. This was where she would die. Alone on a space station surrounded by thousands of beings, and not one of them would lift a finger to help her. She heard footsteps approaching and braced herself for another rejection, or perhaps something worse. Maybe someone would finally decide to end her misery permanently. At this point, she was not sure she would even fight back. "Hey, are you okay?" The voice was strange. It had an accent she did not recognize, and there was something in it she had not heard in a very long time. Concern, genuine concern. Vira looked up and saw a human standing over her. She had heard of humans, of course. They were newcomers to the galactic stage, having only achieved faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. Most species dismissed them as primitive and overly emotional creatures who had somehow stumbled into the stars before they were ready. This human was male with brown skin weathered by years of hard work and eyes that were dark and warm like the soil of a living world. He wore the practical clothing of a cargo ship captain, and there were lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. I said, "Are you okay?" He repeated, and then he crouched down to her level so he could look at her directly. "You look like you are about to pass out." A Tovani trader who had been watching from nearby rushed over with alarm written all over his scaled face. "Captain Cole, do not touch that creature," the Tovani warned. "Do you see the mark on her face? She is Nethari severed. If you help her, you will be blacklisted from every major trade route in the sector. No one will do business with you." The human, Captain Cole, looked at the Tovani and then back at Vira. For a long moment, he seemed to be thinking. Then he shrugged his shoulders in a gesture that Vira did not understand. "Where I come from, we do not let people die in the street," he said simply. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a container of water and a wrapped package that smelled like food. Vira's hand shook as she reached for them. "Easy now," Captain Cole said in a gentle voice. "Small sips. If you drink too fast when you are this dehydrated, you will make yourself sick." Vera sipped the water and felt it spread through her body like life itself. Tears began to fall from her eyes, and she could not stop them. When had someone last shown her kindness? When had anyone last looked at her without fear or disgust in their eyes? "Why?" she managed to ask between sips. "You heard him. Helping me will ruin you. Why would you do this?" Captain Cole sat down on a crate beside her and watched her eat with a small smile on his face. "I have a daughter about your age back on Earth," he said. "Her name is Maya. If she was ever alone and hungry and scared on some station far from home, I would want someone to help her. It is as simple as that." Vira stared at him. In all her years of wandering from system to system, she had never met anyone like this human. He knew what she was. He knew what helping her would cost him. And he had chosen to help her anyway. Something inside her that had been frozen for 3 long years began to crack. "Will you be my savior?" she whispered, and the words came out before she could stop them. It was an old Nethari phrase, a formal request for protection that had not been used in centuries. Captain Cole looked uncomfortable. He rubbed the back of his neck and glanced away. "I am no hero," he said. "I am just a cargo hauler trying to make a living out here. But I have a ship and I have a crew, and we are leaving this station in about 2 hours." He paused and then looked back at her with those warm, dark eyes. "There is room for one more if you want it." Vira clutched the water container against her chest and felt hope bloom in her heart for the first time in years. It was a small and fragile thing, that hope, but it was real. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want it." "Thank you. Thank you so much." Captain Marcus Cole stood up and offered her his hand. "Come on then," he said. "Let us get you on board the Persistence before anyone else decides to give me business advice." Vera took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. As they walked together toward the docking bay, she could feel the stares of dozens of aliens following them. She could feel their shock and their confusion and their disapproval. But for the first time in 3 years, she did not feel alone. The Persistence was not a beautiful ship, but she was solid and reliable, and Marcus Cole loved her like an old friend. Vera stood in the cargo bay and looked around at the worn metal walls and the mismatched equipment that had clearly been repaired many times over the years. It was nothing like the elegant Nethari vessels she had grown up with, but right now it felt like the safest place in the entire galaxy. "This way," Marcus said as he led her through a narrow corridor. "I will introduce you to the crew, and then we will get you something proper to eat and a place to sleep." The first person they met was Dr. Yellen Park, the ship's medic. She was a human woman with black hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. When Marcus explained the situation, she looked at Vira with an expression that was hard to read. "You brought a Netheri Severed onto our ship," Dr. Park said flatly. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our trading licenses?" "Already revoked across 3 systems," Marcus replied with a shrug. "Word travels fast out here." Dr. Park closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she opened them again and looked at Vira. "Come with me to the medical bay," she said. "I need to examine you and make sure you are not dying of anything I can fix." The examination took about an hour, and during that time, Vira also met Keth. Keth was a Maulurian, a species that looked somewhat like a giant octopus with 8 flexible tentacles and large, intelligent eyes. He was the ship's engineer, and he watched Vira with obvious suspicion from the doorway of the medical bay. "Captain, I must protest this decision," Keth said in the gurgling voice of his species. "I have nothing against this female personally, but the Galactic Concord has already sent a non-association advisory about her. Our communications are being monitored. We are being tracked." Marcus crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the wall. "Then we will just have to be clever about where we go, will we not?" Dr. Park finished her examination and pulled up the results on a screen that Vira could not understand. The doctor's eyes went wide, and she leaned closer to study the data. "This is fascinating," Dr. Park murmured. "Captain, come look at this." Marcus walked over and peered at the screen with a confused expression. "You know, I cannot read medical data, Yellen. What am I looking at?" "A mutation," Dr. Park explained with growing excitement in her voice. "The Nethari Council claimed her reversed empathy was a dangerous defect, correct? But look at these readings. Her neural pathways are not damaged at all. They are enhanced. With proper training, she could potentially project positive emotions instead of negative ones. She could heal emotional trauma instead of causing it." Vira felt her heart skip. "What are you saying?" Dr. Park turned to face her with something that looked almost like respect. "I am saying that you are not a monster. You are an evolution. The Nethari Council branded you and cast you out not because you were dangerous, but because you were a threat to their political power. If other species learned that your mutation was an advancement, it would destabilize the Council's monopoly on empathic diplomacy." Before anyone could respond to this revelation, an alarm began blaring throughout the ship. Kef's tentacles went rigid with alarm. "We have company," he reported as he pulled up sensor data on a nearby screen. "A Nethari warship just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They are hailing us." Marcus was already running toward the bridge with Vira close behind him. When they arrived, the main view screen showed a sleek silver vessel that was at least twice the size of the Persistence. A face appeared on the screen, and Vira felt her blood turn to ice. It was a Netheri female with white hair like Vira's own, but her face was cold and hard as stone. She wore the black armor of a Sin Hunter, the elite warriors who track down criminals and exiles across the galaxy. "I am Inquisitor Javer of the Nethari Council," the female announced. "You are harboring a severed criminal. You will surrender her to me immediately or face the consequences." Marcus leaned forward in his captain's chair with a defiant expression. "This is Captain Marcus Cole of the cargo ship Persistence. The person you are looking for has requested sanctuary on my vessel, and I have granted it. Under human law, she is under my protection." Javer's eyes narrowed. "Human law means nothing out here. You are in Concord space, and you will obey Concord authority. Prepare to be boarded." The screen went dark, and a moment later, the ship shuddered as grappling hooks connected with the hull. Vira grabbed Marcus's arm in panic. "Please, you have to let me go," she begged. "They will kill everyone on this ship because of me." I am not worth it. Marcus gently removed her hand and stood up from his chair. He pulled a weapon from his belt, a crude human projectile gun that looked ancient compared to Netheri energy weapons. Get to the engine room with Keth and stay there, he ordered. Dr. Park, you are with me. Marcus, this is insane, Dr. Park said even as she grabbed a medical kit that Vira suspected contained more than just bandages. There are at least 20 soldiers on that ship. Then we will just have to be creative. What followed was the most terrifying and incredible thing Vira had ever witnessed. The Nethari soldiers breached the airlock with military precision, their movements graceful and coordinated as they spread through the ship. They were trained in psychic combat, able to sense emotions and predict their enemies' movements. But they had never fought humans before. Marcus did not fight with grace or elegance. He fought with brutal efficiency and dirty tricks that the Nethari could not anticipate. He threw small metal balls that exploded with blinding light and deafening sound. He set traps in the corridors using cargo cables and welding torches. When one soldier cornered him in a storage room, he beat the Nethari unconscious with his bare fists. Dr. Park was just as surprising. She used medical sedatives as weapons, injecting soldiers with needles to put them to sleep in seconds. She moved through the ship's ventilation system, dropping down behind enemies when they least expected it. Even Keth, who had always claimed to be a pacifist, joined the fight when two soldiers tried to breach the engine room. His tentacles wrapped around them with crushing force and threw them against the walls until they stopped moving. Vera watched the battle through the ship's internal cameras, her hands pressed against her mouth in shock. These humans, these primitive newcomers to the galaxy, were defeating elite Nethari warriors. How was this possible? The answer came to her as she watched Marcus take a knife wound to the arm and keep fighting without even slowing down. It was not about skill or technology. It was about something else. Something the Nethari had never understood. It was about caring so much for someone that you would suffer any pain to protect them. When the last soldier fell, Marcus limped to the intercom with blood dripping from his wounds. Keth, can you get us out of here? The engines are damaged, but I can give you about 60% power. That will have to be enough. Everyone, hold on. The Persistence lurched as Keth pushed the damaged engines to their limit. Outside the view screen, Vira could see Javar's warship trying to pursue them, but a cloud of debris from a dead moon provided cover. Marcus flew through the debris field with reckless skill, dodging chunks of rock and metal until finally they escaped into the darkness of open space. Vera sank to the floor of the engine room and wept. These strange, wonderful, impossible humans had risked everything for her. They had fought for her. They had bled for her. And when she looked at the determination on their faces, she knew they would do it all over again. For the first time in her life, Vera understood why the galaxy had always underestimated humans. They did not fight because they thought they would win. They fought because they believed it was right. Haven's Rest was a small colony on the edge of human space, a frontier world known throughout the galaxy for one simple policy. They accepted anyone. Refugees from a dozen different conflicts had found homes here. Species that were enemies everywhere else lived side by side in this remote settlement. When the Persistence limped into orbit with its damaged hull and exhausted crew, the people of Haven's Rest did not ask questions. They simply offered repairs, medical care, and a place to stay. For the first time in 3 years, Vira began to feel something she had almost forgotten. Peace. The human colonists treated her not as a monster or a criminal, but as a guest. Children ran up to her in the streets, curious about her glowing skin and silver hair. Families invited her to share meals. An elderly human woman named Grandmother Chun taught her how to cook human food and laughed with delight when Vira accidentally set fire to a pot of rice. Dr. Park continued working with Vera every day, helping her understand and control her unique abilities. It was difficult and often painful work. Vira had spent her entire life trying to suppress her emotions, terrified of accidentally projecting them onto others. Now she had to learn how to feel freely and direct that feeling with intention. Think of your empathy like water, Dr. Park explained during one of their sessions. Right now, it is a flood that rushes out without control. You need to learn how to turn it into a river, flowing where you want it to go. Slowly, Vira began to make progress. She learned to project calm instead of fear, happiness instead of grief. One afternoon, she helped a human child who was terrified of a medical procedure by wrapping him in a blanket of warmth and safety. The boy stopped crying and smiled up at her with wonder in his eyes. "You made me feel brave," he whispered. "How did you do that?" Myra smiled back at him and felt tears forming in her own eyes. "A very kind human taught me that being different does not mean being broken," she said. But the peace could not last. The Galactic Concord had not forgotten about Vira, and they were determined to make an example of anyone who defied them. Economic sanctions began immediately. The Nathari closed their borders to human trade. The Tovani followed suit. The Kiriks recalled their ambassadors and issued travel warnings to their citizens. Within weeks, humanity's fragile position in galactic commerce was crumbling. Marcus received messages from other human ship captains, some supportive and some furious. Many people blamed him for bringing this disaster upon their species, but he refused to apologize or back down. "They were always looking for an excuse to put us in our place," he told Vira one evening as they watched the sunset over Haven's Rest. "At least now we know what they really think of us." The breaking point came when the United Earth Parliament convened an emergency session on Luna. The question before them was simple but terrible. Should they revoke Vira's sanctuary and hand her over to the Concord to avoid war? Marcus watched the debate on a screen in the colony's community center. Politicians argued back and forth, some calling for pragmatism and some calling for principle. The numbers were close, too close. "I have to go there," Marcus said suddenly. "I have to speak to them." Dare Park grabbed his arm. "Marcus, that is insane. You're just a cargo captain. They will not even let you into the chamber. Then I will make them listen from outside the door. I cannot sit here and do nothing while they decide whether to throw Vira to the wolves." He took the fastest transport he could find and arrived on Luna just as the final vote was about to be called. The Parliament chamber was sealed, guarded by security officers who had no intention of letting some random freighter captain interrupt the proceedings. But Marcus had not come this far to be stopped by a locked door. He found a maintenance access tunnel that led to an emergency exit inside the chamber. When he burst through the door, alarms began wailing and security officers rushed toward him. But before they could reach him, Marcus shouted at the top of his lungs, "You want to know what makes us human?" The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to this wild-looking man with scars on his arms and desperation on his face. "It is not our technology," Marcus continued, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "It is not our ships or our weapons. It is this: when someone reaches out their hand and asks for help, we do not calculate the cost. We answer. That is what separates us from the Concord." An elderly man near the front of the chamber raised his hand to stop the security officers. Marcus recognized him from news reports. Admiral Yuki Tanaka, a war hero from the first contact conflicts. "Let him speak," the admiral said quietly. Marcus took a shaky breath and looked around at the assembled leaders of humanity. "They built an empire on fear," he said. "The Concord controls the galaxy by making everyone afraid of what will happen if they step out of line. And they want us to be afraid too. They want us to learn that there are some people who do not deserve help, some people we should turn our backs on." He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. But that is not who we are. We built civilizations on compassion. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars because we took care of each other. The day we stop protecting the helpless is the day we stop being human. Silence filled the chamber. Marcus could see politicians exchanging glances, uncertain what to do. Then Admiral Tanaka slowly rose from his seat. He was old now, his hair white and his body frail, but there was steel in his eyes. I did not fight the Concorde's aggression during first contact so that we could become just like them, he said. I fought so that humanity would have the freedom to choose our own path. And I choose compassion over cowardice. He looked around the chamber with a challenging expression. I vote no. One by one, other representatives began to stand. A young woman from the European Union stood and said no. An elderly man from the African Confederation stood and said no. A delegation from the Asian Coalition stood together and said no. The tide was turning. When the final vote was counted, the motion to surrender Vira had failed by a margin of 23 votes. Humanity had chosen to stand by their principles, even in the face of galactic pressure. News of the decision spread across the stars at the speed of light. The Galactic Concorde was stunned. Never before had a minor species defied them so openly. Never before had anyone put the life of one outcast above their own political interests. Back on Haven's Rest, Vira watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. The humans around her were cheering and hugging each other, celebrating their government's courage. Marcus appeared on the screen, being escorted out of the Parliament chamber by security officers who looked almost apologetic. A reporter managed to get close enough to shout a question. Captain Cole, why did you risk everything for one alien refugee? Marcus looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, it felt like he was looking straight at Vira. Because when I look at her, I see a person, he said simply. Not a species or a political problem or a threat. Just a person who needed help. And helping each other is what we do. Vera pressed her hand against the screen as if she could reach through it and touch him. For the first time in her life, she truly understood what it meant to have a family. Not the family she had been born into, the one that had branded her and cast her out, but the family she had found among the stars, the family that had chosen her. The Galactic Concorde did not accept defeat gracefully. Within days of humanity's defiant vote, warships began gathering at the edge of human space. Nathari destroyers, Tovani battlecruisers, and Kirix assault carriers formed a massive fleet that blocked every major travel route. The message was clear. Surrender Vera within one standard week or face corrective intervention. Everyone knew what corrective intervention meant. It meant war. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Persistence, watching the distant lights of the Concorde fleet on the sensor display. Haven's Rest had been evacuated, its colonists scattered to a dozen different worlds. The crew of the Persistence had gathered around him, their faces grim but determined. We cannot win this fight, Keth said quietly. Human military forces are no match for the combined might of the Concorde. Even if every ship in the fleet fought to the last, it would only delay the inevitable. Then we do not fight them with ships, Marcus replied. We fight them with truth. He turned to face his crew and explained the desperate plan he had been forming. They would infiltrate the Concorde's communication network and broadcast Vira's medical data to every corner of the galaxy. If people knew the truth about her mutation, if they understood that the Netheri Council had been lying, it might turn the tide of galactic opinion. And how exactly do we infiltrate the most secure communication network in the galaxy? Dr. Park asked with one eyebrow raised. We have help. Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing a Solari symbol. A hacker named Velith has agreed to create a backdoor for us. But we need to get close to a Concorde relay station to make it work. How close? Keth asked nervously. Within 10 kilometers. The Malurian's tentacles drooped. Captain, the nearest relay station is on Inquisitor Javar's flagship. You are asking us to fly directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. Not us, Marcus said. Just me. I will take a shuttle and let myself be captured. While Javar is interrogating me, the Persistence can slip close enough to the relay to make the broadcast. Everyone began shouting objections at once. Vira pushed through the crowd and grabbed Marcus by the shoulders. No, she said firmly. I will not let you sacrifice yourself for me. This started because of me, and it should end with me. Let me surrender. Let me surrender. Let me absolutely not. Marcus interrupted. We did not come this far just to give up now. He took her hands in his own and looked into her eyes. Besides, I have faith in you. While I am keeping Javar busy, you need to prepare the broadcast. Use everything Dr. Park taught you. Show the galaxy what you really are. Vera wanted to argue, wanted to beg him not to go, but she could see the determination in his eyes. This was a human who had decided what was right, and nothing in the universe could change his mind. Promise me you will come back, she whispered. Marcus smiled, but there was sadness in it. I promise I will try. The shuttle launch felt like a funeral. Vira watched through the Persistence's sensors as the tiny craft flew toward the massive Concorde fleet. It took less than 5 minutes for Javar's ship to intercept it. And then Marcus was gone, swallowed by the enemy flagship. Keth piloted the Persistence through a dangerous asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while they crept closer to the relay station. Dr. Park worked frantically to prepare the broadcast equipment, and Vira sat alone in her quarters, trying to find the courage to do what Marcus had asked. She had to project her emotions across the entire communication network. Not fear, not pain, but hope. She had to make billions of beings feel what she felt, make them understand that she was not a monster. It was the most terrifying thing she had ever been asked to do. Meanwhile, on Javar's flagship, Marcus experienced horrors he had never imagined. The Nathari Inquisitor did not use physical torture. She was far more sophisticated than that. Instead, she used her empathic abilities to reach into Marcus's mind and force him to relive his worst memories. He felt again the moment when his wife died in his arms after a shuttle accident, her blood hot on his hands as she whispered that she loved him. He experienced the years of guilt and drinking that followed, the slow destruction of his relationship with his daughter Maya. He relived every failure, every disappointment, every moment of weakness and cowardice. Humans are so fragile, Java whispered as she circled around him. Your emotions control you. They make you weak and predictable. Tell me where the severed one is hiding, and I will end your suffering. Marcus hung in the restraints, his body shaking and his face wet with tears. But he did not break. Even as Javar dragged him through the darkest corners of his own mind, he clung to one simple thought. Vera was counting on him. He could not let her down. You know something about suffering, do you not? Marcus gasped between waves of psychic assault. I can feel it in you. Under all that cold training and duty, there is pain. Old pain. Javar's attack faltered for just a moment. You know nothing about me, human. I know you were like her once. Marcus forced his eyes open and looked directly at the Inquisitor. The Nathari do not create sin hunters from happy, well-adjusted citizens. They take the broken ones, the outcasts, the ones nobody will miss. They take children with mutations or defects, and they break them even further until all that is left is obedience. Javar struck him across the face, but her hand was trembling. Shut your mouth. You were severed once, were you not? Marcus continued relentlessly. Maybe your mutation was not as dramatic as Vira's, but it was enough to make you different. enough to make them want to dispose of you. But instead of killing you, they turned you into a weapon. They made you hunt others like yourself. The Inquisitor stepped back, her face pale and her composure cracking. I serve the Council. I am loyal. You are afraid, Marcus said with sudden compassion in his voice. Afraid that if you stop hunting, they will hunt you instead. But it does not have to be this way. Vira escaped. She found people who cared about her. You could have that too. Impossible, Javert whispered, but there was doubt in her eyes. At that moment, the galaxy changed. Vira had finally found her courage. Sitting in the center of the Persistence, surrounded by jury-rigged broadcast equipment, she closed her eyes and opened her heart. All the hope she had gathered over the past weeks, all the love and kindness she had received from Marcus and his crew, all the joy she had felt learning that she was not broken, she poured it all into the communication network. Across 1,000 worlds, billions of beings suddenly felt something they could not explain. A warmth in their chests, a lifting of spirits, a sense that somehow, somewhere, something wonderful was possible. And with that wave of emotion came the truth. DR Park's medical data streamed across every screen, every datapad, every holographic display. The evidence was undeniable. Vira's mutation was not a defect. The Nethari Council had been lying to the galaxy for their own political gain. On Javer's flagship, even the guards felt Vira's projection. Several of them lowered their weapons, tears streaming down their faces as they experienced pure hope for the first time in years. Javer herself stood frozen, caught between her training and the overwhelming wave of emotion washing through her. She looked at Marcus, at this broken, bleeding human who had somehow seen through her armor to the frightened child hiding beneath. What did she just do? Javer asked in a voice that was barely a whisper. She showed you what she is, Marcus replied. She showed everyone. And now you have a choice. You can be what they made you, or you can be something new. The Inquisitor was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she walked to the control panel and began entering commands. What are you doing? One of her officers demanded. Standing down, Javer replied. I will not serve a lie. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as the grappling systems released. Javer walked to the holding cell and opened the door herself. Go, she said to Marcus. Go back to her. Tell her that she is not the only one who wants to be saved. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. Then he nodded once, a gesture of respect between two warriors. Thank you. As he ran toward the shuttle bay, he could hear Javer's officers screaming demands and accusations behind him. But the Inquisitor's voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady. Let him go. The old way is finished. Perhaps it is time to find a better one. The Galactic Concord Assembly Hall on Nexus Station, Orion 7, had never seen anything like this. Representatives from 100 different species filled the massive chamber, their voices raised in argument and accusation. The revelation of the Nethari Council's lies had shattered the political order that had held the galaxy together for centuries. Some species demanded justice. Others defended the old ways. And caught in the middle of it all were the humans, the primitive newcomers who had somehow become the center of the greatest crisis in galactic history. Vera stood at the entrance to the hall, frozen with fear. The last time she had been on this station, she had been starving and alone, shunned by every species she encountered. Now she was about to walk into the heart of galactic power and face the beings who had tried to destroy her. Marcus stood beside her, his body still covered in bandages from Javer's torture, but his spirit unbroken. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. You can do this, he said. You have already done the hardest part. Now you just have to let them see who you really are. Admiral Yuki Tanaka was waiting for them inside, standing tall despite his age. He had traveled all the way from Earth to speak on behalf of humanity, and his presence gave Vera courage. "Are you ready?" the Admiral asked. Vera took a deep breath. "No, but I will do it anyway." They walked into the chamber together, and the noise gradually faded as every eye turned to watch them. Vera could feel the emotions of the crowd pressing against her mind. Curiosity, hostility, fear, and underneath it all, a desperate hope that something good might come from this chaos. The Nethari Council sat on a raised platform at the front of the hall, their faces cold and composed. But Vira could feel their fear too. They knew their power was crumbling, and they had no idea how to stop it. Admiral Tanaka stepped forward to address the assembly. "Distinguished representatives," he began, his voice clear and strong despite his years. "You have all seen the evidence. You have all felt the truth that Virus Selthon broadcast across the galaxy. The Nethari Council has been lying to us all. They branded this young woman as a monster and condemned her to death, not because she was dangerous, but because her very existence threatened their political control." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several Nethari Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But I did not come here to condemn anyone," the Admiral continued. "I came here to ask a simple question. What kind of galaxy do we want to live in? Do we want to continue building our society on fear and lies? Or do we want to try something different?" He gestured toward Marcus and Vira. When this young woman was alone and desperate, when every species in the Concord had turned their backs on her, one human cargo captain chose to help her. He did not ask what it would cost him. He did not calculate the political consequences. He simply saw a person in need and reached out his hand. The Admiral's voice grew stronger. "You measured us by our ships and our weapons and found us lacking. You called us primitive and emotional. But strength is not about power. It is about what you are willing to sacrifice for others. A single human captain risked everything for one person nobody else would help. That is who we are. And if that makes us weak in your eyes, then perhaps you have forgotten what strength truly means." The chamber erupted in noise as species began arguing among themselves. But something was shifting. Vira could feel it. The Admiral's words had touched something deep in the hearts of the assembled representatives. A Solari diplomat rose from her seat, her flowing robes shimmering in the light. "The Solari Collective formally withdraws from the Galactic Concord," she announced. "We will not be party to an organization built on deception." More species began to stand. The Malorians declared their withdrawal. The Outer Rim colonies followed. One by one, the foundations of the Concord's power crumbled away. The head of the Nethari Council, a stern-faced male named High Arbiter Votus, rose to his feet with fury blazing in his eyes. "This is madness," he shouted. "You would destroy the stability of the entire galaxy for the sake of one defective exile? She is not defective." The voice came from an unexpected source. Inquisitor Javer walked through the chamber doors, her black armor marking her as a servant of the Council. But there was something different in her bearing, a lightness that had not been there before. "I was sent to destroy her," Javer said, as she walked toward the platform. "I was trained from childhood to hunt and kill those the Council deemed dangerous. But when I looked into her heart, I found not a monster, but a healer. When I looked at the human who protected her, I found not weakness, but courage beyond anything I have ever known." She turned to face her former masters. "The Council did not create me from loyalty. They took a frightened child with an inconvenient mutation and broke her until only obedience remained. They did the same to hundreds of others. We were your weapons, your enforcers, your tools of fear." Her voice cracked with emotion. "But tools can choose to stop being used. I choose to stop." High Arbiter Vothos stared at her with horror and betrayal. "You would condemn your own people?" I condemn the lies, Java replied, and I offer hope that we can build something better. She walked down from the platform and crossed the chamber to stand beside Vyra. For a long moment, the two Nethari women looked at each other, one who had been cast out and one who had chosen to leave. I am sorry, Java whispered, for haunting you, for everything. Vera reached out and took her hand. Then help me fix it. What happened next would be studied by historians for generations. The Galactic Concord, as it had existed for 500 years, dissolved in a matter of hours. Some species retreated into isolation. Others formed new alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. The Nethari Council was dissolved and replaced by a transitional government that promised reforms. And at the center of it all stood humanity, the species that everyone had dismissed as too primitive and too emotional to matter. In the weeks that followed, Vera became something she had never imagined possible, a symbol of hope. She traveled from world to world, using her abilities to help those who suffered from emotional trauma. She taught others like herself, Nethari who had been born with mutations and spent their lives in hiding. Together, they began to heal the wounds that centuries of fear had created. Java stayed by her side, at first as a protector and then as a friend. The former Inquisitor had much to atone for, and she dedicated herself to that work with the same intensity she had once brought to hunting. Marcus returned to his old life, hauling cargo across the stars aboard the Persistence. But his routes were different now. Instead of avoiding Concord patrols, he carried diplomats and refugees and medical supplies to worlds that had never known kindness from strangers. 1 year after the day they first met, Vyra found Marcus on the observation deck of Nexus Station, looking out at the stars. She walked up beside him and followed his gaze. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "My daughter," Marcus replied. "Maya finally agreed to meet with me. We are going to have dinner next week." Vyra smiled. "I am happy for you." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships come and go from the station. So much had changed since that day in the market when a starving exile had collapsed near a human cargo bay. "You saved me," Vyra said finally. "I never thanked you properly for that." Marcus shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just answered when you asked." Vyra turned to look at him, this remarkable human who had changed the galaxy by doing something simple, helping someone in need. That is what makes humans different, is it not? "You answer." Marcus looked out at the thousands of ships now flying under new banners of cooperation. Alliances forged not from fear, but from the example of one stubborn freighter captain and one exile who refused to give up. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess we do." In the distance, a new ship was launching from the station. It bore the symbol of the Galactic Healing Initiative, an organization founded by Vera to help those who had been broken by the old order. On its hull was written a phrase in a dozen different languages. "We answer." The ship carried hope into the darkness, just as Marcus had once carried hope to a starving girl in a crowded market. And across the galaxy, beings of every species were learning the lesson that humans had always known, that true strength was not measured in weapons or territory or political power. True strength was measured in compassion, in the willingness to help, in the courage to answer when someone asked, "Will you be my savior?"